think we could get going. Think we could get going, everybody. We've given everybody a few minutes and have a good number of people here. So let's get going. If you don't know me, I'm Jen Close, Executive Director of Generation Housing, and I am happy that you can join us here tonight for this webinar, Housing on the Ballot. Our house party this time, even though we're partying online with y'all today. So listen, this is participatory. We want to hear your questions in this thing. So make sure that you're using the chat box for questions, and also and if anyone wants to kind of +1 a question, you can do that too, or just add the question so that we know if we have a lot of questions, which questions that we want to add, we want to elevate to the top. Generation Housing, if you haven't been to one of our events or you don't know much about us, it's just like in a really small nutshell, we are an organization that's committed to increasing the supply, the affordability, and the diversity of homes in the North Bay. We focus on advocating for effective housing policy, sustainable funding resources, and collaborative efforts to build vibrant communities where everyone has access to affordable and resilient housing options, because we think that is the key to creating a healthy community. So we're going to dive right in because we've got to talk about 3 ballot measures, and also because our first speaker turns into a pumpkin in like 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave Alden, and thank you for being here, Dave. Dave is a seasoned engineer, civil engineer with over 40 years experience. That includes hydroelectric projects, as well as residential, recreational, and retail development. He's got a deep passion for walkable urbanism, which led him to start writing on the subject and then create Petaluma Urban Chat, which you may or may not know about, but is an awesome organization that we're happy to partner with and follow. And he continues to advocate for that urbanism today. And he is here tonight to talk about Measure Y. And with that, I am turning it over. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me here this evening. And just so you know, it's not that I turn into a pumpkin, it's that there's a meeting of the General Plan Advisory Committee this evening dealing with housing issues, and I'm on that committee, so that is my constraint. And I appreciate you juggling your schedule to get me on here.
See how deep that passion runs. So
yeah, hey,
yeah,
part of being a community. I only learned about this 24 hours ago. I don't have a lot of presentation lined up, no slides. I'll tell you everything I know about Measure Y, and I'm not even sure I can fill 10 minutes telling you that. It's a pretty simple measure. Hopefully will pass easily. What Petaluma is doing with Measure Y is renewing their existing urban growth boundary with just a couple of minor tweaks. The current UGB would expire on January 1, this coming January 1, 2025. Measure Y would renew that to January 1, 2050. More or less aligns with the term of the general plan update we're currently working on. There are 4 small changes to the UGB. 3 of them are small areas that are currently considered possible expansions to the city limits in the south part of town. Those were eliminated this time around. The General Plan Advisory Committee couldn't see any reason to keep those. The Planning Commission and the council agreed. The bigger changes on the northeast, or really, let's say north end of town. You know, there's a smart station coming, either called Corona Smart Station or North Petaluma Smart Station, Petaluma North, excuse me. Part of the reason for that station, the reason MTC was willing to support that station, is having enough housing to make it a transit-oriented development or community, to use the newer phrase for that. And there wasn't enough room in the old UGB to build a community that would have met the MTC standards. So it used to be a quarter mile, quarter radius to the north of the new station has become a half-mile radius with a few tweaks to follow property lines. So it's sort of a jagged quarter of a circle running north of the station. And just to make sure that development, or that a good plan comes up for that site, that none of us want half-acre lots there. We want walkable TOD to get to the smart station. MTC has given a grant to the city of somewhere around $1 million. The city will hire a planner, RFP coming out end of the year. And sorry, a note just popped up there. Doesn't apply to me, I don't think. Um, that planner will work on a project that will eventually become a specific plan to ensure that that area meets the standards of MTC and meets the standards of what the general plan wants for that site. And just, I hear the concern sometimes that it's going to be too easy to develop that site's going to happen too quickly. It's a even with the change to the UGB, there will be the specific plan process. There will be a LAFCO process. There will be a requirement that 6 of the 7 council members approve the annexation. It will be a long process. I probably won't be here when it happens, but I'm happy to be part of getting it started. Probably the only other thing I have to say is in the general plan will be something that I believe comes from state law, which is an open-ended option to bring 5 acres into the UGB at some point in the future, no specific location, if required for affordable housing. I think state law requires that. Personally, I've always been of the opinion that affordable housing should be closer to the heart of downtown where people can live without cars and build wealth rather than forcing them to buy cars. But if state law requires us to have that condition, we'll have it. With that, I think I've truly told you pretty much everything I could. I'm here for questions.
All right. Thank you for that. Do we have questions in it? Let's see. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat.
Which is probably the best thing for us to hear. I am part of the advisory committee pushing for this. We think it is such a complete slam dunk. There shouldn't be questions. It should have pass easily. So if that's the case, cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that this is kind of going to be a theme of the night, is that most of the 3 measures we're here talking about, I think, are pretty straightforward, and are honestly kind of hard to argue with if you want to improve your community, if you want to get housing built in the right places. And so it's it might be that simple, but what you are doing, and hopefully the people here listening are feeling, is empowering them to tell their friends and neighbors who might need more explanation or might need some convincing.
Okay, I did see one question just popped up.
Oh, good.
And it's a good question, and it indicates that I started too far down the road. The question is, what is a UGB? And I really should have started with that. UGB is an urban growth boundary. It defines the extent to which a city can annex without modifying the UGB. Basically, it is the 25-year extent that the city can become. It is a concept that goes back, well, really, it probably had its genesis in the growth limitation that Petaluma pioneered in the 70s. It then became a real element of land use planning in the 90s in Oregon. I spent 13 years in Oregon working with UGBs. It's just a way of making sure that cities don't sprawl and become what we see in the Silicon Valley or in the LA basin. It's a way of keeping the cities having their own identity, their own boundaries. That help?
Sometimes those of us in the housing biz forget to explain the wonky terms right from the get-go.
To me, UGB, I've just known that for 30 years, but yes, I agree. I should have started with that.
I just saw a question about advice on Proposition 33 and 34, and we put something in there, but Stephanie went ahead and did, and thank you, that we're not covering those tonight. And actually, we don't take a position on everything to do with housing, and these are ones that we have not taken a position on, but we could refer you to California YIMBY and YIMBY Action, who I know have who are partners of ours, and I know have information on their websites about those. All right, any other questions for Dave? Does he get to turn into a general plan pumpkin even sooner? If not, then we could let you go, I think.
Okay. I will step away. Have a great meeting. Talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Bye.
All right. And I think that means it's back to me, yeah? Where I'm going to talk a little bit about Prop 5. I have been thinking about and working on Prop 5 to some degree for man, a year and a half, almost 2 years, or working on Prop 5 for almost 2 years, but really been thinking about Prop 5 or something like Prop 5 since 2018, when Santa Rosa's Measure N, a local housing bond that we put on the ballot. We put on the ballot a year after the Sonoma Complex wildfires, and we thought that this community was ready to pass it. And almost 63% of the voters said yes to Measure N. But it didn't pass. And it didn't pass because for local housing bonds and local infrastructure bonds and all except for education at this point, bonds, you have to have a super majority. So that means that in Santa Rosa, a year after the fires, when we had suffered such a great loss in our housing stock, and we knew as a community we needed to invest in housing solutions, that 38%, actually less than 38%, 37 something percent of the voters, a small minority, thwarted the will of the majority in voting for the housing solutions that we needed most. So that did not seem very democratic to me then. It doesn't seem very democratic to me now. And it's something that we think really has to change. And so there you go with Prop 5. And before I dive into Prop 5, I'm just going to sort of remind everybody or ground everybody in the needs. And we just put out a long and in-depth annual state of housing report. This is the cover. And it has lots in there, and it's on our website. You can find it there and read it as a flip book. You can download a PDF. If you'd like a hard copy, you can get in touch with us and we can get you a hard copy. But I will tell you that in the smallest nutshell, it says there is not enough housing, that there is a mismatch in housing types to the needs of the population. We don't have anywhere for our seniors to downsize. We don't have anywhere for young people to move to when they want to leave their home and when their parents want them to desperately leave their home. We don't have any starter homes for young professionals. We have a mismatch in our housing types, not enough. And then, of course, it is too affordable for people to pay their rent, for a lot of people, more than half the people, to pay their rent or pay their mortgage and then be able to meet their other basic needs in a healthy way, in a way that allows them to save for retirement, in a way that allows them to save for emergencies, in a way that allows them to buy the healthy food they need, to get the health care they need, to get the educational support they need. It is too much. Even when they can make their rent, they're not being able to make the payments to everything else. So not enough kinds, not the kinds we need. It's too expensive. And then the thing that is really concerning is that with all that need, our production is not fast enough. We are not building enough housing. We are already way behind what we actually need now. We're going to need more in the future, and we're way behind. And so we need help with that. And there's some housing that is easier to, more financially feasible to build than others. The kinds that are really hard to finance is that subsidized affordable housing that meets the needs of our low wage earners, of our workforce even up to 120 AMI or 120% the average median income, which might be your first through 10-year teachers. It might be your health techs, the people who drive ambulances, the folks who are in that kind of low middle class working force job that we really rely on in this county. So we need to be able to build that housing, and that requires public subsidy. That requires that we can have local dollars. And one more thing about the local dollars that I think is important to remember is that when we raise local money ourselves for housing, that's not all the money we get. we leverage that for state and federal funds up to 10-1, right? So let's look at the measure going back to 2018, the measure N, I think it was $121 million that was on the ballot. So we would have, with that $121 million, actually raised over $1 billion for housing. That's really big money. But without that kind of local match, we cannot get any state or federal dollars. We have to have local money. So, and one more thing about that local money, here's an example of what that kind of local money can do, is that when we got local money from wildfire disaster tax credits, and that's thanks to Congressman Thompson, thank you for that. And then thank you for our advocacy to make sure that we got our fair share. We got to build the project that replaced those units lost at Journey's End. We got to build a whole lot of the housing that you're seeing coming up downtown, or has already opened downtown. That's the kind of housing that you get to build, good quality multifamily housing. But that money's gone. So we need more local match money. So we need the power to raise our own money. And so that brings us to yes on 5, Proposition 5. And I remember it by just saying that Prop 5 is a high five on housing. But this is the logo, so you can look for it and remember it and get materials and pass it on to your friends. And listen, I think if you're here, probably I don't need to convince you of these things so much. You just need the information to be able to tell your friends. But we are only producing a fraction of the kind of housing that we need. And we'll send these slides to you so we don't have to look at them word for word, and we don't have to spend too much time on them. We've got another measure to talk about. But in short, it empowers local voters to pass housing and infrastructure bonds at a 55% instead of a super majority. So if we need housing and we also need the infrastructure that helps support that housing, or basic infrastructure like fixing our bridges, things like that, then we can raise local money through bonds here at just a 55% vote, which is still a strong majority. It's not just 50+1, but it's getting closer to real democracy. This is a whole list of local bond measures that failed with strong majorities. It's an example of how often we are letting a minority of people thwart the will of the majority and interfere with us as local residents and our ability to address our local problems in a very specific way, in a locally driven way. So it happens a lot. Santa Rosa is just one example. And we used to be on this list, and I'm not sure how we got off this list, because I think we're a good example, but we all remember that. So it happens a lot, and it's something that we've got to put a stop to. It's really hamstringing our local residents and our local governments from solving problems in the way that we know we need to. The thing that is really important, because people are going to ask about this, is that there are really strict accountability and oversight measures within this, within Proposition 5. So you have to have, and this is just like a very small bullet point summary of how very clear you have to be with your bond in order for it to qualify to get to take advantage of Prop 5. But you have to have a real clear list of project types. You can't just put a bond on that says for housing, or for housing and infrastructure. It has to be more specific than that. You have to let the voters know exactly what kind of project types it's going to fund. There have to be clear conflict of interest checks for local officials. There's going to be an independent citizens oversight committee for any bond that takes advantage of Prop 5. That's going to have to be overseen by independent citizens. And that there are really clear, really strict and independent and transparent auditing requirements and it's kind of a 2-level audit where they go through a normal independent audit at the local level, and then that's reviewed by the state auditor. So if you want to take advantage of Prop 5, you have to meet all these requirements. All right. So that's not making it, too easy necessarily. It's making sure that good bonds that really should take advantage of this and really do deserve to get Prop 5 55% voting threshold, that those are the ones that can. You are wondering, I know you're wondering this, and thank you for wondering this, how you can help. right? That's always our favorite question. How can we help? Well, the first thing you can do is you can go to the Prop 5 website and you can endorse Prop 5. That is helpful. And maybe we could get that in the chat. You can click right through. It's super easy to add your name to the list of endorsers. You can act as a volunteer. If you are interested in volunteering in one way for the campaign, you can sign up on the campaign website. You can also give us your name and we can be in touch with you and make sure that we are providing you opportunities to volunteer in favor of Prop 5. And then the other thing is just to tell when you talk to folks in your life, your friends, your family, your colleagues, we need to vote for Prop 5. And using our local example, that 1 year after the fires, when we needed help the most, that a majority of voters voted our Measure N down. I think that's the most powerful way to do that, to really show how we need this so that a minority of voters cannot interfere with our ability to address our most pressing needs. And then, share yes on Prop 5 materials, and whenever you can get involved in planned field activities. And again, you can do that through the website. And if you want to say, I want to go walk precincts, believe me, we can put you in touch with people that will help you do that. If you want to table, if you want materials to help spread the word, if you've got a network and you want help writing an email to send it out to all your friends, these are all ways that either we or the campaign can be helpful to you so that you can help us get Prop 5 passed. Oh, and then there was a website that I think, yep, thank you, Stephanie, for putting that on the chat. But also, I forgot that I had this slide that you can just point your phone at to endorse Prop 5. So I'll leave that up for just a second. And then if you have questions, well, you can ask them now, but also going forward in terms of more questions about involvement, you can either email info@yesonprop5.org. You can also email Leo on our team, who is heading up our Prop 5 activity. And so either info@yesonprop5.org or leo@generationhousing.org. And with that, I'm going to see if we have questions. And I don't think I see any, but I'm not entirely sure. I should have put the QR code back. All right, I'm going to just last call for questions. Maybe it is so clear, which is great. And if there aren't any questions, then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cal Weeks, who is our policy director at Generation Housing, our team policy wonk, and he is going to talk about Measure O in Healdsburg.
There was a question that just got put in the Q&A if you have time to answer that. So.
I don't see it. I only see the, can you tell me what it is?
Yeah. What does Prop 5 say?
Oh, here. I see it. I'm looking in the wrong place. What does Prop 5 say? Oh, well, I would have to go pull my ballot for exactly that. I'm going to have to refer you to the ballot or the website for that. But it is, in essence, that it reduces the voting threshold for local housing and infrastructure bonds to 55%. One thing that I want to make clear, because there is a little bit of misinformation out there, is that Prop 5 itself has absolutely no impact on your property tax bills. That's an important argument, is that it's going to raise your property tax bills. Prop 5 itself has zero economic impact for you, the voter, the resident, the property owner. Now, if Prop 5 passes, then someone can put, like we did in 2018, Measure N. We could put a housing bond on the ballot. And then if a strong majority of 55% or higher majority of local voters approves that bond, then it could have some increase to your property tax bill. But that's sort of one election beyond, and that would have to pass. And if there was not good reason for that, I can't imagine that 55% or more of the local voters would pass it. So it does not, this does not have a impact on your property tax bill. And I'll give kind of one more sort of data point around property tax for bond measures. And there was going to, and many of you probably know, there was going to be a regional bond measure on the ballot this year. And then the campaign decided to put it off until the next election. And that regional bond measure at $20 billion for the 9-county Bay Area, that was going to be split, divided by population among the nine Bay Area counties. That would have cost $100 for every, $200 for every $1 million of assessed value of your home. So if you have $1 million home and it's assessed at $1 million, so, and remember that your home might be worth $1 million, but it might have been assessed at $500,000. It might have been assessed. It was assessed the last time you refinanced or when you bought it. But if you, for every $1 million of assessed value, it's $200 on your property tax bill. So if you have $1 million home, then yeah, you pay $200 a year, $200 a year, so that we can build more housing to support the essential workforce of our community. So you can support your kids and grandkids being able to live here. So you can support the teachers that teach them and the caregivers that take care of our seniors. That's what $200 a year for your $1 million home. That's what it would cost. And with that, if there's not, I'm sorry, I had the chat open, but not the Q&A. Once again, screwing up the Zoom. I'm going to turn it over to our policy director, Cal, then. Thanks, everybody.
One second, I might get this all up and running. All right. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Callum Weeks. I'm the policy director here at Generation Housing, and I'm here to talk about Yes on O. Measure O is a Healdsburg ordinance or measure that is coming to voters, obviously, this election. So essentially, and this is probably going to be the far more challenging measure to explain. In a lot of jurisdictions, it used to be the case that they had something known as a growth management ordinance. What is a growth management ordinance? Well, they were designed, as the name might imply, to essentially limit how many units of housing could be built in a community and control the growth and limit the growth over, a set period of time, and it would be re-upped or re-voted on, every so often. One of the challenges that kind of came with that is it often, it did exactly what it was intended to. It limited housing growth, which ultimately led to spikes in the cost of housing and a real limit on a variety of different housing types and communities across the state. Now, Healdsburg is one of the last jurisdictions in the state. I think there's like a dozen left in the state that have policies like this in place. And slowly but surely, over the past 24 years, they've been changing it and trying to augment it to create what we like to refer to as a more healthy housing ecosystem. Because a healthy housing ecosystem consists of a variety of different types of housing across, the affordability spectrum. You need a little bit of something for everyone. If you have any sort of imbalance, then someone is going to struggle. And I'm not saying people won't struggle anyways, but it's always important to create that ecosystem where everyone has a choice of the type of housing they want to choose and what works for them financially speaking. And so, what is Measure O trying to do now? Well, let's first start by saying one of the things that they did, I think it was in 2017, was all affordable, deed-restricted affordable units, so low-income units, were exempted entirely from the policy. So what does that mean? That means previously they would have been essentially limited, a developer would have been limited to producing actually, the city would have limited altogether 30 units of affordable housing every year. I don't know if that's the exact number, but it's in the ballpark of that. So only 30 units of affordable housing could be built. So say, for example, a developer comes forward and he or she or they have a 60, 70 unit project. Well, they would have to phase it over 2 years because they would only be allowed to build 30 units 1 year and then the rest, the balance of them in the next year, which usually, causes the project to be more expensive and it really stacks up the cost. So it's not great, it's not ideal, and it certainly limits development, and it scares developers away because it's a huge commitment. Anything can happen over 2 years. I mean, the economy could totally tank. It's not something generally they're really interested in investing in. So affordable housing was exempted, and since then, a lot of affordable housing has been built in Healdsburg. Many of you might have seen as you're coming in, you'll see the affordable housing project that was just built as you're coming in towards the downtown area. And there's many more units that have been approved and are set to break ground, I think, like literally any day now. And so they've been doing really well in terms of producing affordable housing that's deed restricted for low income earners in the community, and that's wonderful. But the one issue that still remains is the GMO doesn't distinguish when it comes to like market rate housing. It doesn't distinguish between multifamily and single family units. So right now, again, I think this is ballpark number, but only 30 units of market rate housing are allowed every year in Healdsburg. And again, it doesn't distinguish between multifamily and single family homes. So a developer could come in and build 30 units of single family homes in a subdivision. And then that means there's no market rate multifamily housing that can be built that year. And generally speaking, multifamily projects are on the larger end. So even if someone did come forward, they probably have to build it over the course of 2 or 3 years. And so what we're trying to do is essentially exempt multifamily or market rate multifamily projects, multifamily and hopefully townhomes and duplexes and like that, and other housing topology similar to that. And create more opportunities to build this housing in core areas of the city. So, for example, you have the South Entry. So the South Entry is what I just mentioned. It's what most people, I think, recognize as like the entry into downtown Healdsburg. You'll see that new kind of luxury place being built, but prior to seeing the luxury place being built, you'll see the affordable housing that is a part of that broader project. And then also around the rail station is another area that will be exempted if Measure O passes. So they'll be allowed to build multifamily housing around the SMART station. The downtown will be off limits still, just the immediate core area, but then the North Entry, so pretty much everything along the Healdsburg Avenue corridor to like, I think it's Big John's, will be also exempted, and you're allowed to be build, or I can't speak English, you'll be allowed to build multifamily housing. I should note, because this is a common concern that has been brought up, that Healdsburg still has what's known as an inclusionary ordinance. So what is an inclusionary ordinance? It's an ordinance or a type of policy that most jurisdictions in the state have in place that essentially, it's set according to what their needs are and what they want. So it mandates that you have to have a certain level of deed restricted affordable units in market rate projects. So if you have, for example, 100 unit project and you have a 10% inclusion area, then 10 of those units need to be deed restricted affordable for low income earners. Healdsburg's inclusionary is 15%. And so there'll still be affordable, deed restricted affordable units built as a part of these projects. But the problem is they don't have any multifamily market rate housing that has been built in the last 20 years. I mean, it is very limited. And it's because of this GMO policy. So again, going back to what I said at the beginning of this, we need a healthy housing ecosystem. And that means building a little bit of everything for everyone so that people have the opportunity to choose what works best for them and meets their financial needs. This is just trying to create more flexibility. And really, at the end of the day, this policy change only applies to like 15% of the city. 85% of the city will remain untouched. This doesn't affect any of the single family neighborhoods. It is purely concentrated along the Healdsburg Avenue corridor, which is honestly where we want to see a lot of the growth anyways. Because as some of you might or might not know, the SMART train is coming to Healdsburg in 2027. So we want to start creating the conditions to get housing built in along that corridor. So when the train does come, you know, we're ready to start creating an even more vibrant community than Healdsburg already is. And so there are a lot of concerns I know about, you know, what will this multifamily housing look like? And certainly, you know, with any policy changes, sometimes it's a little bit experimental, but what we do know is we need to make some sort of change because what we're doing right now is not working. And Healdsburg is going to struggle. I mean, we need to make housing options for our firefighters, our police officers, because believe it or not every firefighter makes a lot of money. Some do, some don't, but you need to create options for people. And so we are focused on providing, and I say we, not we as in Gen H, but Measure O is aiming to kind of write that and create conditions in which we can actually you know, open up more opportunities for multifamily development. And to be clear, because a lot of people have also brought this up, no zoning is changing. And by that, I mean, we're not changing the height that is allowed. You know, we're not changing the number of units or the density of properties. You know, this is purely just to allow the development of market rate multifamily housing without any restrictions. So now no longer will there be a 30 unit only per year allotment of housing that can be built. And that way we can actually, again, move forward and create a healthier housing ecosystem. And so that's more or less the nuts and bolts. Might have left a few things out, and I can't actually see if there's questions because of the presentation. And I just realized I didn't even scroll through the presentation, but that's fine. Let me see if there's questions or anything. Are there any? I don't see any. I'm actually having a hard time seeing it now too as well.
Cal, do you want me to read them out to you?
Yes, please. Oh, I found them.
Oh.
But still read them for me. Thank you.
Okay. Is it true that the state has the power to take over housing policy in Healdsburg if it doesn't build enough affordable housing for growth, i.e. Measure O not passing?
So yes and no. There is something known as SB 35. So every 8 years, every jurisdiction in the entire state is through a formula, a methodology that is established every 8 years. They are given an allotment of how many housing units they have to permit in a community. If you don't meet every single income threshold, then there's very low, there's low, moderate, and there's above moderate or market rate. If you don't meet all those income categories and develop or permit, quote unquote, permit all those different types of income thresholds within that spectrum, and you don't meet the number of units that have been mandated by the state, then what happens is there's a law that is in place known as SB 35, and that does allow developers to come in and essentially bypass the zoning requirements and build a bigger project. And that doesn't necessarily always happen. They can actually build a smaller project too, which I've seen on a couple occasions. It doesn't mean they'll go bigger, but they have more flexibility and they get a much more streamlined process. And so there's an incentive now for jurisdictions to start pushing more for housing during the 8-year cycle. So we avoid things like that because we do want to maintain local control to some extent, but the state is going to step in because we are not meeting the housing demand. We are, as Jen noted, we are grossly underperforming across the state. It's no secret. We have a nationwide housing crisis. And yes, every state is stepping up and starting to institute laws that are going to override local control because we, again, have a housing crisis. And so that was a very high level response. It's actually a little bit more intricate than that, and I could speak on that for 30 minutes to an hour alone. But again, that is kind of a high level overview of it.
The next question was, what impact will this have on the environment?
I mean, arguably, you could say it would be a good thing. One of the things we do know is all new multifamily housing projects that are built in the state of California are mandated to be 20% more efficient than existing housing stock. And in many cases, they're, efficient in terms of water usage. And in many cases, they're as high as 30% more efficient. So we know this newer housing stock is actually going to have a pretty low impact on the community in terms of water usage. Because newer development, I mean, it's newer technologies going in. We know more in terms of how to develop buildings and make them very eco-friendly. And so the impact relative to a single family subdivision is much lower. Because think about it, with a single family subdivision, you have to spread things out, put a bunch of pipes underground, all this infrastructure. And the developer builds that in the first place, but then, the city is on the hook. So years in line, when you have to replace that infrastructure, it is very expensive. So it's much better for the community to build up rather than out. If you build out, you're just stacking up your bills later on in the future. If you build up, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper for the community in the long run and just better for everyone, because at the end of the day, we want a walkable community. And everyone really wants a walkable community. And so this is the way to achieve that. And in terms of other impacts, I mean, again, if it's a walkable community, that generally speaking means there'll be less, need for vehicles. So that means less carbon emissions from vehicles. And so, there's another, positive of creating more dense, again, walkable, bikeable communities. And so I always argue that if you really want to do something positive for the environment, we have to build up. We have to build out our downtown cores. We have to focus on really trying to go back to what we used to do. And decades ago, it always used to be the case that we built communities in a denser way, because even at the early days of when we had cars, I mean, our communities were still quite dense. And everyone would walk or bike, and then obviously cars came onto the scene, and next thing you know, we're building these sprawling cities, and then you get Los Angeles, as Dave noted earlier on, and Los Angeles is pretty much the biggest sprawl city in the country. And so we're trying to avoid that, and we're trying to create, again, communities that are just a little bit more sustainable, transit oriented, really built to take us into the future, not, keep us sitting where, we've been for decades and decades and decades.
Cal, one more question for you. If someone on the call, an attendee on the call, wants to get connected with the campaign, who can they reach out to?
Ironically, the point person is actually also Leo. Mr. Leo Buck wears a lot of hats in this community and is a very active campaigner. So if you're interested in communicating with Leo, we can get you in touch. Measure O also has a website, which I probably should have shared that link with my colleagues in the beginning. There is a QR code, actually. Hold on. I will advance the slide like I was planning on. Yeah, it's yesonO.yesforhomes.com, and you can scan that QR code, and it will take you to the website where you can learn more. There's an FAQ. You can get involved. You can volunteer. They definitely need more volunteers. We're trying to spread the word. And so it's a really great opportunity to have a big impact on the community. And like I said, this is really about moving us forward, not keeping us in the same kind of circular pattern we've been going in for decades now. And it's having a huge impact on our economy, on the standard of cost of living and overall standard of living. I mean, I don't know about a lot of you, but it's not easy living in Sonoma County, and we need to create more housing options if we want to carry us into the future. And that's really what it's all about. It's about keeping an eye on the future. More questions? I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Thanks, Cal.
All right.
I'm gonna jump in now. Hi, I'm Sonia Bick Barwick. I'm the Civic Engagement Manager at Generation Housing. So thank you guys all for being here tonight. I wanted to touch a little bit if you want to learn more about Gen H or get more involved with what we do at Generation Housing. I wanted to go over a few things that you can do to get more involved with what we do. So we have a petition. I want to let you know that these things that I'm mentioning are all going to be put into the chat. So if you're interested in doing any of these things I'm about to talk about, you can find out more in the chat. So we have a petition that we are circulating that we would love to get you to sign. This petition puts your name as a supporter for more housing in Sonoma County. We have a plan to bring more housing to Sonoma County, and it's a really solid plan. It's worked in other communities, and we really, really need our community to help push this forward in our community, so Sonoma County can be a place where everybody can live. So that's one of the things is the petition. We also are currently working on a letter to the editor campaign. So, if you've never written a letter to the editor, we have an online, very simple, easy to follow way to write a letter to the editor, letting them know why housing is important to you. So it can be a personal story. We also have talking points that you can refer to and add to your letter. And if you go to our website with the link that you have, you can write a quick letter. We say about 200 words, so it won't take a lot of time. And you really want to say to your community and especially our elected officials why housing is so important in Sonoma County. I know for me, it's because I have a 20 and a 22-year-old, and they are not able to move out on their own because of the cost of housing. And I would love them to stay in Sonoma County. And that is not going to happen unless we get more housing. So that's my reason. But I also recently, one of the things that's been heard over and over again is seniors are really having the hardest time finding housing. So it's really important for every, as Jen mentioned earlier, every stage of life, we need different housing and we need more housing to accommodate those needs. So if you would like to write a letter to the editor, we'd love for you to do that and show your support for more housing in Sonoma County. We would love for you also to become a member. Membership starts at $5 and it goes up from there. And members are really important to us because that's another way of showing that you care about housing in Sonoma County. So becoming a member is a way to have your name added to the list of people who support housing. And tonight we have a special, we're offering, if you want, it was mentioned earlier that we have a new state of housing for Sonoma County that just was released hot off the press last week. And we will send you, if you become a member tonight, we will send you a copy of that report. And it's a great report about why the importance of more housing and the human, how it's affecting all these different ages and stages in Sonoma County. So lastly, a big part of what I do is I really try to get our community to show up also in person to speak at council member meetings and important meetings where housing is being discussed. And on November 12th in the city of Santa Rosa, we are going to, there's going to be some discussion about impact fees. I won't get into the nitty-gritties of impact fees, but we're really working to try to bring more housing to Sonoma County. And this is one of the steps, one of the 5 steps that we work on in our action plan. And we would love to have your voices in the room. So we're going to follow up with you on how to get more involved with that. But if you could just put it on your calendar for November 12th, we would really, really appreciate it. The gift of feedback. So we have after we have a house party. This is a different type of house party, but we love to get people to give feedback on how we did tonight. So I think that when we close this there'll be an evaluation that will be sent to you, or will be. I'm actually sorry, Stephanie, I probably messed this up.
It'll show up both on the screen after the webinar closes, and it will be emailed to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you,
All right.
Stephanie. So yeah, so we'd love to get your feedback now if possible on how we did and we were always looking to improve. So any suggestions, we would love to hear from you. So what I think there's some things in the chat. Let's see. Is there anything that I need to respond to?
I think we've responded to everything. If there's any
Okay.
last questions, go ahead and put it in the chat or the Q&A and we can answer. And you can also email info@generationhousing.org and we will respond.
Yeah, and then you can always reach out to me too. I'm open to emails and people, I'd like to meet with you, answer any questions. My email is sonia@generationhousing.org. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.